to another episode of Wizard Goes Boom. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about gold for XP, that mechanic. So gold for XP is a very weird mechanic and one that doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you think about it. It especially doesn't make sense if you're coming from a newer edition of D&D where it doesn't have that mechanic. This is a strictly speaking old school mechanic. And to give you a little bit of history, it's been around since the beginning of it, since OD&D from 1974. And it became an optional thing in 1989 with the release of AD&D 2nd Edition. So with it being an optional rule, it kind of fell out of favor, probably because it didn't make a whole lot of sense to a lot of new players and new DMs at the time. So let's think about it for a moment. Why would you gain experience from finding treasure? What does that do? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's kind of a weird mechanic, but I'll explain in this video why it's important and why it works. And I will say that gold for XP does have its detractors, even in old school, that don't believe that it's a good mechanic, or it can lead to weird situations where players are hoarding treasure or turn into thieves, essentially. But there are advantages to it. For example, when I ran 5th edition, I ran that campaign for about 5 years in the Forgotten Realms. And just as an experiment, what I did was I set the experience levels to that of a BX fighter. And I implemented gold for XP. And the advantage there was I noticed an immediate attitude change. The players were no longer murder hobos. They were no longer trying to kill anything and everything just for a little bit of XP. And that's how 5th edition works, is you really only get experience points from combat. But as soon as I changed, I implemented gold for XP, so every gold piece they found, they gained an experience point. And a change happened. They went from trying to kill everything to focusing on exploration and trying to solve situations without necessarily going into combat, or maybe trying to avoid it. So they can get the treasure and they can get experience that way. Admittedly, though, Gary Gygax also said that this mechanic is a compromise. This is what he said in the AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide. This is 1st edition. He said, "Players who balk at equating gold pieces to experience points should be gently but firmly reminded that in a game, certain compromises must be made." So right there, he said it's a compromise. "While it is more realistic for clerics to study holy writings, pray, chant, practice self-discipline, etc. to gain experience, it would not make a playable game roll along. Similarly, fighters should be exercising, riding, smiting pelts, tilting at the lists, and engaging in weapons practice of various sorts to gain real expertise or experience. Magic users should be deciphering old scrolls, searching ancient tomes, experimenting alchemically, and so forth, while thieves should spend their off hours honing their skills, casing various buildings, watching potential victims, and carefully planning their next job. All very realistic, but conducive to non-game boredom." So what he was saying there is that in order to make the game more realistic, you would have to essentially make it a downtime game. Like all the experience would be gained in downtime. That would make things more realistic. So while Gold-for-XP is not very realistic, it's a mechanic to help the game along. And it's a mechanic to sort of avoid power gaming and munchkinism or murder hoboism, which is something that you kind of tend to see in 5th edition, for example, with most of the experience, if not all of it, being in combat. So one of the things you'll remember back when I would talk more about old school is that combat in old school was dangerous, and it was, but I don't think that was the primary reason for Gold-for-XP, because you still got experience from combat. The Gold-for-XP is kind of a very fair division of experience, or giving out experience. In 2nd edition, for example, when I first started playing that, I noticed that giving out experience varied from dungeon master to dungeon master. It was really a lot of DM's fiat, especially when it came to giving out experience for good role playing. And there wasn't much in terms of encouraging exploration. So already with 2nd edition, we started getting into more combat situations than we would have in 1st edition, or Moldve Basic, or Cook Expert, or Beckme. It also kind of changes the primary motivation for players as well. Once they receive 1 experience point for every gold piece they find, it becomes more about exploration, as opposed to stopping earth-shattering events, stopping these big bad evil guys that want to take over the world. It's more of a sandbox-oriented mechanic. Because, well, let's face it, one of the things you can do in more story-based games is you can do milestone experience, or just level them up after every session if you wanted to. But that encourages a different kind of gameplay than what old school was primarily about. And I know one of the big criticisms of Gold-for-XP as a mechanic is that it encourages potentially bad behavior in the PCs, like them turning into thieves and trying to pilfer every gold piece they can. But there's ways around that as a dungeon master. There's 3 ways to do it. 1, you can do it the old-fashioned way, which was how it was done in original Dungeons and Dragons, is that once you find a gold piece, you get 1 experience for that. Or it also applies to gems as well, and any magic item that you sell. If you don't like that, there's also, you don't get the experience for the treasure until you return it to your home base. So it's not enough just to find it to get the experience. You have to return it to your home base. That makes it a little bit more challenging. It involves logistics. Also involves prioritizing what they can and can't take back. Maybe you could make it a little bit more challenging with encumbrance. A third option, which is the Shadow Dark option, is you get experience for how much money you spend. That is, you not only bring it home, but you spend it carousing, and that's where you get the experience. It's another variant of the Gold-for-XP mechanic. The idea there being basically that in old school, the adventuring party are treasure hunters as opposed to saviors of the world. That doesn't mean that they can't also save the world or that they can't have any motivation beyond just treasure, but they're mainly explorers and treasure hunters. That's what old school kind of boils down to. Now, there's plenty of examples of where PCs get involved into much bigger things than their own pockets. For example, the GDQ adventure path against the Giants, the Drow, and Queen of Demon Web Pits, or even the Temple of Elemental Evil. There's plenty of examples where the Gold-for-XP mechanic still applied, but they were beyond just simple treasure hunters. But that's the basic idea behind old school, and they'll move beyond that from there as they advance in level. Once they hit name level and such, they'll get involved into the bigger world, the wider world. But back then it was mainly dungeons and dungeon delving. So while Gold-for-XP does have a lot of detractors, it does have a lot of criticisms, it is an alternative, and a good alternative, especially if you want your players to focus on things like exploration. And it's an alternative to constant combat and getting experience from that. So not everything has to be a fight. It's an alternative way to even get experience by going around a fight or avoiding it entirely. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll hope to get another video out as soon as possible. Thanks again. Have a great day.